Okay, Adam, Amanda, thank you so much for joining me. Welcome to Kickstart Connections.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, it's exciting. We met a few weeks ago now, and we've been talking about getting this recording done since then. So really glad today is the day. We've got a lot to talk about.
That's right.
So you guys both own A Langley Developments and Superyacht East Coast. Why don't we start by having you tell me a bit about both of those companies?
One of these things is not like the other.
Okay, great place to start.
Well, I guess
one's a sexy one.
When it comes to the name, they might feel like they don't fit together, but it is actually very strategic.
Yes.
A Langley Developments Incorporated is a company I founded in June 2021, which is a property development company focused on waterfront development. But it has also a marketing department, and that's where Amanda comes in, who is the marketing expertise, who joined the company a year after I had started it to help with all of the marketing requirements because our projects are part of a story that we like to tell from inception to completion. But the Superyacht East Coast narrative, I'll let Amanda explain that one a little bit. It makes sense.
Yeah, so A Langley Developments is kind of more of our local brand. It's our on the ground work that we're doing in this region.
Right.
So infrastructure services, experiences at ports, helping developments happen along our coastline, marine tourism, all that stuff. But it wasn't really able to...
Come on, it wasn't sexy enough. That's what Amanda says. It's named after me and it wasn't sexy enough. I take offense to that.
It's named after both of us.
That's
Adam and
actually
Amanda
true.
Langley,
Well, now it
A
is.
Langley.
Yeah.
We can both pretend that we're underneath that umbrella. No, when we were going to boat shows, it didn't seem right to introduce ourselves as A Langley Developments. They're like, what is that?
Right.
Like at these Superyacht yacht shows.
Yeah.
And then we looked at the industry, and there's all sorts of companies out there in other parts of the world that lead with superyacht. So Superyacht Australia.
Yeah, we were really trying to draw attention to the marine industry and specifically marine tourism as an opportunity. And if you talk about recreational boating, it's really difficult. Like, where do I start? Like canoes and stand-up paddle boards, local motorboats, big yachts. Like,
Superyacht is the most organized.
How do you get people's attention?
It's the most organized group of marine tourism.
So you can actually go
huge.
to a super yacht show, whereas other marine venues would be boat shows that would be inclusive of everything, and it's hard to get attention.
Yeah.
That was very strategic to use that word for good or for bad. We get people
draws attention, certainly.
Well,
it does.
it draws attention, and where you take that attention, where you take that conversation, is what's important.
Yeah. So that brand is really about putting a spotlight on this region
as a destination.
Yeah. So if you kind of look from the outside, one is building it, and then one is telling people about it so that they'll come.
Yeah. Right. So one can't happen in the absence of the other.
Yeah.
Right. And if we look, we're located today in this beautiful office space overlooking
I'm so distracted. I'm like drawn to water, so I'm just staring at the window.
Halifax waterfront, the most visited destination in Atlantic Canada. It would not be that have that recognition if you weren't out there telling the reason for why people should come visit or come live by it or work around it, right?
Yeah.
So when we started the company, I left a corporate job of 13 years and rather abruptly. I wasn't fired, but I left. I saw an opportunity and I left. And without,
I love what you said. I wasn't fired.
I wasn't fired. No.
Neither one of us were
just
fired.
I want to be clear.
Thanks for clarifying.
I loved my job, and we can talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But I had to start a company. And
it was right after the pandemic too.
Yeah, and I was most known in the work that I had done previously by my name. And I just thought, well, if I start a company and people don't connect it to me, I'm going to be spending all my time explaining
that
that's my company.
Your name was your reputation and your brand. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's
it just happens that we both have a name that starts with A.
Yeah. And my lawyer at the time was sort of suggesting otherwise because, well, what if you sell the company and someone takes your name? I said, I'll take that risk.
Exactly. And I mean, and that stuff can always be changed down. They'll deal with that as and when it happens. But let's talk a bit more about that transition. Because, in previous conversations, I know you were both kind of in corporate jobs, right? You started A Langley Developments in 2021. Amanda, you came on board a year later.
Came on board, but I mean, I was behind
You're
the
already
scenes.
doing it. Yeah.
I designed the logos and did the website.
Oh, I thought you were doing the marine pun. Came on board. That was pretty good. As we embark together.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
Sorry.
So many puns.
But yeah, tell me a bit about sort of that leap. Because it is a leap, isn't it? When you we kind of talked about it a bit before we're recording, when you leave that stability, especially government jobs too, right? Which I believe you were both.
We were both involved in arm's length organizations as part of the provincial government of Nova Scotia. Mm-hmm. I worked for Waterfront Development Corporation, which turned into over time Develop Nova Scotia, which is responsible for managing the entire Halifax waterfront and portfolios in Lunenburg and other parts of the province. It's now a different organization called Build Nova Scotia, but I left in 2021 after an incredible career working with amazing people to transform some of our most valued but under-leveraged provincial assets, including the Halifax and Lunenburg waterfronts, into these incredible platforms for economic development. Right. There's a whole bunch of other stories behind that and really fun things that we did over time. But to get to that kind of transition point, I reached a time in my career there where there was a growing gap in a understanding and a support for the marine sector, specifically marine tourism. And as that gap continued to grow, I felt the only way to fill it was to embark on my own and focus on it entirely. And that's what I did. And through that, again, one of the most important parts of that is telling your stories. That's where Amanda came on board with all of her expertise and her previous career. Also with the provincial government, and you can explain more about how you transitioned over to the private sector.
Yeah, so my career's always been in marketing, branding, communications. It just so happened my previous life was about food. I was marketing food.
Okay.
Seafood specifically. So I worked for the Department of Fisheries, provincial. And agriculture, and worked in the whole food world, buy local. I was instrumental in developing the international seafood brand. So, traveled all around the world and increased exports. And
wow.
So I saw Adam, you'll notice in this conversation, his enthusiasm for this industry is contagious.
Yep. Sure is.
And we are boaters.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like a complete departure.
Obsessed boaters.
And I mean, I've grown up in this region. So, it's not hard to love selling what there is here.
Well, I mean, it's why we're all here, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's the water.
Let's
really face
is.
it. Yeah.
And I think the pandemic really showed people, you were working remotely, that it gave us this pause, this reset. And I saw what he was doing and how we could build this thing together. And I know we're going to touch on it. We are married.
We sure are going to touch on that in a second. Yeah.
It's a very touchy relationship.
So it just felt natural to come on board in that way.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think I was ready. I think there's people who can work for their whole career. Working for someone else or working for the province specifically. I think when you have that entrepreneurial gene, it can only be bottled up for so long. So.
Right.
I totally agree. I have that gene myself.
Working in a cubicle is just not going to be me forever.
Yeah, and I think if you have that creative brain, you do have to be creative. You have to see opportunity, right? Adam, you were talking about, I really saw a gap and I was like, how are we going to fill this gap? And then you kind of, I can do that, right? And the same for you when you transitioned, you really saw the vision on how this can grow.
Well, I think you, from the beginning, we're just going to drill, we'll just say that nasty word of super yacht, but a super yacht is not going to come all the way to this region and just visit Halifax, for example.
Right.
And so you were really working for an agency that had a mandate to promote a certain area, and you saw it as bigger than that.
Sure. I mean, the word super yacht, for whether you understand what they are or you love them or you don't like them, it starts a conversation. And that's so we took the risk of leading with the Superyacht East Coast narrative to get focus on this opportunity. And in that, we've had to, explain what that industry is. And there are bad actors in that industry like there are in any industry. So sometimes it gets a bad reputation. And, very wealthy people own these big boats. But if you build to the requirements of a super yacht with infrastructure and experiences and itinerary and make it accessible to everyone, then you're creating an environment that does invite participation from all walks of life and all types of boaters. And you don't need a boat just to get to the water's edge. It's about access.
Yeah.
But it couldn't have those conversations without some type of catch, and that was the hook.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's a tremendous opportunity for communities to invite these high net worth visitors because they have big spending footprints, and they access some of our greatest experiences and most authentic products, and they take that back and show them to their friends, and others will come. So it is capturing a specific market, but in doing so, opening up an industry for multiple participation across diverse sectors, which importantly includes ship repair and maintenance. Some of our clients are shipyards. Lunenburg and East River Shipyard on the South Shore are emerging as these incredible diverse destinations for service, but also for the experience of a more modern marina facility. That isn't just about tying up your boat and walking ashore. It's about being, in a bigger environment of Nova Scotia. So there's a lot to unpack, and I didn't mean to go down a rabbit hole there.
It's super interesting though, because I think you're right. Most people, they would, hear Superyacht East Coast, understand kind of roughly what you do, but think of it very much that high level. But you just did a really good job of explaining how that impacts the economy at every level.
Right.
Yeah. And creates that access and creates that experience.
It invites
for visitors, right?
Non-marine industries as well to participate in the marine economy. It's not just, I've said before, it's bigger than the boat. So a lot of people will be familiar, especially as visiting or living in Halifax and the waterfront and the summit, are a lot of very large yachts and local boats all visiting, all collecting on the Halifax waterfront, which makes this incredible environment.
Super dynamic.
But those boats, it starts with they pay to tie up to the wharf, they provision, they fuel, they go to restaurants, they have flights of people coming and going from the airport. They're doing excursions. It just goes on and on and on.
They're getting haircuts. They're getting their dogs groomed. Like it touches every
industry. Yeah.
So it was a gap. It was an opportunity, but it's just really important that it's not just a one-dimensional, one-trick pony.
Yeah,
this is a really sophisticated industry, marine tourism. And you don't have to have a boat to be a marine tourist. Arguably, every person that comes to Nova Scotia is a marine tourist because they're coming for the coastline.
We're almost an island.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, a big part of our work is almost advocacy for marine tourism.
Right.
We've become the unofficial spokespeople for it. And we just look every day to recruit and invite other participants so we can really stand this up as a sustainable industry for Nova Scotia and Atlantic Canada and Canada.
I love that. Yeah. I love that. All right, we're going to go back to that question now.
I was trying to avoid it. No. So I thought you forgot it.
Well, it's interesting. And I have to ask you again, we were just talking about transitions. So we talked about, transitioning from government jobs into the unpredictable but very fun world of entrepreneurship.
The wild ride.
It is a wild ride. It's a roller coaster. It really is, mentally and everything.
Yeah.
But to also do that with a spouse, and you guys have kids and you've been together a long time, and how was that initial adjustment, and maybe I'll ask some tips. Maybe there's some people listening that, maybe they are thinking about going into business together, or they are. How do you make it work? Because it's got to be a lot.
We get this question all the time.
I'm sure you do.
I remember we were in a meeting once, and they stopped the meeting, and they said, "You guys must have really interesting pillow talk."
And Amanda's like, "What's pillow talk?"
I know. I was like, "We're too tired when we get in there. We're not talking about." Anyways, I honestly don't know if a lot of people could do it.
Yeah.
We're lucky because we have really diverse skills. So we kind of let each other
come together so naturally.
Yeah, we let each other run with what we're good at. And I'm not even going to pretend to have the knowledge or the expertise of the marine side that Adam has. I mean, his whole career was built on developing waterfronts. Like I'm not taking ownership of that.
But she's helping tell the story.
But I haven't I know I've learned, and you have to know your worth, that I do have a knack for taking all the stuff that you spit at me and making it sound like everyone, in a way that everybody can understand, and telling that story.
She's an incredible skill.
Interpreter for my brain. And
it's exhausting.
Well, she knows you best. She knows you best too, right?
But I think,
What tips do we have?
I mean, that's kind of like a technical answer. I think we have an incredible passion for where we live.
Yeah. I can tell that.
We were hell-bent on making sure our kids could grow up and share that passion so that even if they move away, they want to come back, at least to visit. But they go out and become ambassadors for this incredible place, this little part of the world that we live in, which is absolutely, it's indescribable in many ways. And so that passion fuels our ambition. And our ambition is driven by our own ability to be so collaborative every day. And, we have ups and downs, like it is a roller coaster. But at the end of the day, we see the big picture together.
I think if we didn't have that passion,
that shared vision too, right?
We have the shared vision and the passion, I think, is key. Because if one person is only half in, it does take over your life. So, when people go out, when they have babies and small children, and they go on a date for the first time, and they end up talking about the child.
Right, yes, so that's your business.
Our kids
we don't talk about kids anymore
now. Yeah. So we're just, it's part of every aspect of our life. We live this salt and sea life too. And we work this salt and sea life. So we end up probably not having as much.
Well, it's a huge advantage even for our clients. I mean, they have people that we consider ourselves immediately a partner in all of our clients' business. So they've added that additional resource that never stops working. I mean, that sounds unhealthy, but it's just when you're working about something you love, then all the cliches apply. It's not really work. Well, it's actually a lot of work.
Yeah.
We've never worked harder.
It's crazy.
It's still work, but when you have that passion, it's rewarding work, isn't it? And you can see, I mean, if you're anything like me, just the feeling of knowing that I'm building something is very, very satisfying to me.
Yeah, I think for you, that's probably the most challenging part of entrepreneurship because you're he's actually very handy and we've renovated houses and stuff. So I think sometimes you want to wake up and see a project.
You want to be able to, at the end of the day, you actually want to see what you've done, right?
Polished.
Right.
So I think that's probably the most challenging thing for entrepreneurship that you find.
Yeah, and having people understand what you're doing, because you don't want to spend all your time explaining because I'm so much I want to be doing.
Yeah.
So I feel like we're always ahead and we're trying to catch people up.
On this side, we talked about that.
We did, yeah.
On the actual market side.
Well, they're like, hurry up.
Yeah, they get it. They're like, this, what you're doing, it's actually a sector there that people understand. They can't wait. And you're on a high when you're in the market, and then you come home and you have to catch everybody up and kind of explain marine tourism is something important.
Well, it's educating, isn't it? Right, and it's kind of that's that first hurdle.
Yeah.
A lot of education.
And that's where the storyteller comes in.
That's correct. And how you
It's two different stories, though. I think that's probably the most challenging thing for a marketer and branding these two companies that have a lot to do. They overlap, but their purpose and the way you're communicating to those two different audiences.
Everybody just wants to talk about super yachts.
Yeah.
But the core of our business, again, is a waterfront development, and that's...
we have some amazing clients. Can we say some of them?
Sure. I think
we can. Do some shout-outs.
We did a really, really lovely project with Africville, and they have an ambition to build a marina there.
Waterfront,
We've been working with the community of Sheet Harbor on a marina there,
lovely.
And that is such a needed...
it's a big gap between
the
Eastern
Shore, between Halifax and Cape Breton. Yeah. That's a long stretch of beautiful coastline that people tend to avoid because there's not...
nowhere to stop.
There's no infrastructure and services along there for a certain size, like boat.
There's not. It's recognized.
So we're super excited about that project.
We've done a lot of work with the destination marketing organizations, Discover Halifax, Destination Cape Breton, Yarmouth Acadian Shores, Coastal Nova Scotia, who have been supportive of marine tourism as an opportunity. We're doing a lot of work in Cape Breton, specifically in the community of Badek.
We even bought a house there.
Which is, and I grew up in Badek.
Oh,
lovely.
You did? Okay.
I did, yeah.
Nice.
My family moved around a bit, but always to have landed in really cool spots. So Badek, we're the primary consultant on their waterfront development, which includes their wharf, their boardwalk, and the island that protects the harbor. So we've been able to bring that narrative together it's the harbor waterfront development, not just individual components.
I think that's the most rewarding thing for me is that I get to work with these sometimes rural communities who don't have marketing staff or resources to have a marketing person and to be able to tell their story in a way that not only gets visitors excited, but it's getting the community engaged, which I love.
They're seeing the opportunity there for development, right?
Yeah, their story hasn't really been told, or if it has, it's often in a bit of a cliche marketing way around some of the stereotypes of coming to Nova Scotia. We're really exploring more of the people and what are the bigger opportunities that have not really been kind of highlighted, and bringing them together through the marketing, and then also that marketing feeds back into the investments that are required to stand up more of the infrastructure. So that's.
I think it's hard to explain what we do because we don't fit in a box.
Well, it's different,
but that's why it's exciting.
Yeah. Well, I think if you wanted to sum it up, really, and this comes with a lot of my experience in project management, involving multiple stakeholders and multiple partners and multiple property owners. We're the coordinating effort. We bring all of that together. All that spins into the center. We are the center, and we make sure that then everyone is informed of what the ambition is, what is the project, and how do we all fit into. So we help everyone see themselves in the project, because a lot of time projects die or stumble when certain stakeholders or partners feel either threatened or not, that they're not being represented in that work. And if that's overlooked, then your project is going to run into challenges. So we bring that together to make sure that everyone is identified. And
that communication piece is so important, isn't it?
Right?
Yeah. So you guys really kind of facilitate that part as well.
And then all the sort of the technical aspects of building a project, from the mundane, tendering and procuring of services. But we also do the really cool stuff working with clients around concept development and design. And then it's
not always just Adam and I. We have experts.
We bring in partners.
Other teams on projects.
And one of the pieces that people overlook, that's why one of my area of specialization is the operations. So we want to make sure that our partners that we're working with are building or working towards a sustainable development.
Right.
So once it's built, it can be responsibly operated and continue to grow. Halifax Waterfront is a tremendous example of how that system has been put in place and just continues to grow and create more opportunity.
Success,
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because these can be significant investments. And if they're properly operated and a sustainable model is followed, they'll just become more productive over time rather than a burden on the community.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's look ahead.
All right.
To wrap things up, let's look ahead. We could look out ahead that way. What does
it's so hard to? I find it challenging to look ahead because we're pivoting all the time.
Right.
So, no day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, really 7 days a week. None of those days look the same.
Yeah.
And so looking ahead
That's
for me.
That's the beauty of entrepreneurship.
Yeah, looking ahead for me is like, okay, well, I'm looking ahead to the afternoon.
Yes.
Because the to-do list never gets done.
Okay, to tell you what, then let me rephrase. Anything
I was already 10 years out.
I know, he's so good at that. He's a visionary.
Yeah, well, again, that's why it works, right? What's on the go that's kind of like particularly exciting coming up? I know that you recently launched a podcast, so I want you to tell me and the listeners a bit about that.
Yeah.
And then, just really to kind of wrap up, anything else that's on the horizon that you wanna get out there and you want to talk about?
So we did recently launch Yachting Canada. So we were actually on a podcast on a super yacht at Palm Beach International Boat Show, and the podcast was Yachting USA, and it's with Yachting International Radio. And we were
shout out to Rick Thomas, our good friend.
Yeah. He's the host of Yachting USA, and the interview was great. And we came home and we're like, that was great. And the owner of Yachting International Radio is actually a Canadian. It's a woman. Go Rhea.
Yes.
And
Rhea.
She just saw that our story in Canada wasn't being told, especially to this industry. People don't, the first thing that they think of when they think of Canada is not yachting.
Oh yeah, no, it's snow-covered mountains and all those stereotypes.
Highest tides in the Bay of Fundy, like shipwrecks. It's not.
Well, what happened was our podcast with Yachting USA was broadcast. I commented on and said, there's still lots more to tell.
Yeah.
And she's like, can you do a better job? I said, sure. She said, okay, well, you're doing a podcast called Yachting Canada. I said, let's do it.
The whole concept is sharing the ports, places, and people that make this a must-see yachting destination. So we've done 3 episodes so far. We're having a lot of fun with it.
Yep.
And it, I see that growing. Obviously, we're on the East Coast, but it is telling the story of Canada. So there's so many stories to tell.
I don't think you can ever perfect it, but we're making sure the platform is strong as we take it across the country.
Yeah.
But it's celebrating all the ways to get on the water and enjoy the aquatic lifestyle of what we call Canada's Blue North. It's not the Great White North. It's the Great Blue North.
He's created all these little sayings. The Blue North. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's demonstrating that accessibility is at play, because we want to remove that perceived barrier to boating.
Yeah.
And show people, whether it's through local sailing schools or through other clubs or whatever, that are actually accessible for especially for kids to get into sailing. So we want to work more with sailing schools and that sort of thing. But it's a great opportunity to celebrate. Especially in Nova Scotia and Atlantic Canada, it's also a celebration of our maritime history and how we have, this incredible advantage being the ocean, and we want to celebrate that.
I think sometimes with entrepreneurship, you can get stuck in the day-to-day, and the podcast is a really nice way for us to take a step back and see how far we've come and talk about all of the people that are part of this journey. This journey. Yeah. So to look ahead, I know Amanda's looking ahead to this afternoon because we're doing it. But, if we're looking 5-10 years down the road, we would love to look back with a great big collective of partners and destinations and all of these incredible experiences of our region and of Canada, and see it kind of rolled up into this product of Nova Scotia and Canada as a global yachting destination through a coordinated effort of marketing and provision of service and really creating this inclusive industry that at the end of the day benefits our communities and benefits our economy, and perhaps our kids will stay and work here.
But there's becoming more opportunity, and a lot of people are coming back now, aren't they?
And then I find, having grown up in Nova Scotia and been forced to leave to find work, it's just we've kind of been really hell-bent a little bit on demonstrating that non-traditional industries, such as the marine industry, or perceived as non-traditional, are very viable for careers, and you don't have to go to sea and work on a ship necessarily. There are lots of land-based careers in the marine industry. So that's kind of an underlying part of our work.
There was probably easier ways for us to go about this. I mean, we didn't start a business. We were building an industry.
Yeah.
And so, there was some beating your head up against the wall moments in the last few years, but that's one of my favorite
comes
sayings.
with the territory.
Yeah, that's entrepreneurship.
There's
highs and lows.
But
100%. Sometimes both in the same day.
Amanda might see it as beating her head against the wall, but I see us pounding through that door.
Yeah,
and that's how we have to work.
Yeah, and I think that's key. You were asking for tips. One person always has to. You're going to have it low, and that's just part of the journey. The other person has to lift them up, and you can't both be low at the same time.
Because you'll sink.
Yeah.
Right?
So there is a bit of that.
And that's an effective partnership, isn't it? Right. But it's being aware of that. Yeah. I love that. Well, before we completely wrap up, though, anyone listening that wants to learn more about you, how's the best way to reach you? Maybe give a shout out to your websites, where to find the podcast, Yachting Canada, etc.
Yeah. So we have 2 websites, langleydevelopments.com and superyacht.eastcoast.com. A Langley Developments is not on social media per se. It's a consulting company. Yeah. But if you want to follow us on Superyacht East Coast, we're on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. He loves LinkedIn.
I love LinkedIn too.
And our podcast is on all wherever you listen to podcasts, or you can visit our website and click through there.
Perfect. Yeah. Thank you so much, Amanda, Adam. So great to have you.
I could listen to you talk all day. Anytime you want me to come back. I love your accent.
You'd regret it eventually.
No,
People say that to me and I'm like, you'll regret it.
Call me every morning.
This is your wake-up call. But no, thank you so much for taking the time. Pleasure to chat with you as always, and wish you all the best.
Thanks for having us. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you.